Please get your Bibles and be opening to James chapter 1. We're continuing the series of holy living in an unholy world. And today we're going to be looking at a message that I've entitled, The Blessing of Battles. We're going to be looking at James chapter 1, verses 2 through 18. If you've been a Christian for any length of time at all, you know that being a faithful follower of Christ is not always easy. And sometimes it can be downright difficult. It is a challenge, there's no question about it. But it's a challenge that you can meet and you can achieve spiritual success through faith in God. That is a major part of the message that James gives in the beginning of his letter. Remember who James was and why he wrote this letter. He was, we believe, with good evidence, the oldest brother of Jesus. And at first he didn't believe in Jesus. He later became a believer, a leader in the church at Jerusalem, evidently an elder in the church at Jerusalem. And after Acts chapter 8, when Christians were scattered because of the great persecution that arose, he wanted to encourage members of the Jerusalem church, as well as those who had been scattered away, that they needed to stay faithful and not give up, because that is the way that they could achieve the success of salvation. And for that reason, it's important that we pay attention to what he wrote, because we're in the same boat. We are living our daily lives just like they were living their daily lives. And being faithful to God is the number one task of a human being. Why? Because pretty soon we're going to leave this life and go into eternity. And if we believe the Bible, there are only two options. You'll either be in eternity with God in heaven, or you will be in eternity with the devil and all who are lost. So let's jump into this text and get some more guidance from God as we strive for holy living in an unholy world. And as you think about fighting the battles, I want you to understand that those battles can have a positive purpose in your life. That's why I titled this lesson, The Blessing of Battles. It's not that you're going to win every battle that you fight, but you can always learn from them and grow. The first guidance and blessing we're going to see is to meet the trials of life with joy and wisdom from God. Look at verses 2 through 4. 2 through 8, pardon me. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Let's be honest. Who likes facing tough times? Who likes dealing with the trials of life? Notice how James puts it there in verse 2. Who likes having to face the struggles that all of us inevitably face in our daily lives? Nobody likes it. I don't like it. Not to be surprised if any of you like it, but let's be wise enough to trust God and realize that those times are going to come. And if we will respond to those tough times with faith, faith being primarily trusting God and the guidance that He gives us in His Word, don't try to figure things out on your own. What we need to do is look at the key concept that James is giving us here and be wise enough to trust God's guidance. Marilyn was driving through Johnson one evening, and she stopped at a traffic light by an Easy Mart. A young lady had definitely run out of gas. I can't imagine any young ladies doing that, can you? She ran out of gas and she went in the store to ask for help, and a young man came from the store, and the two of them were trying to push the girl's car up a steep driveway. I mean, it is steep. And as Marilyn watched, she was sitting there at the stoplight, they got the car about halfway up, and then they couldn't push anymore. And the car came rolling down backward and ran over the young man who was trying to help push it. Now, Marilyn went over there and stopped to see if she could offer any help. The boy was injured, but not seriously as far as she knew. But that wasn't a very wise thing for that boy and girl to be doing, was it? I don't know how in the world they thought they were going to push this car up that very steep driveway to get into the gas station. I wonder why they didn't just find a gas can and get some gas, pour it in the tank, and drive it up there. In any event, do we do something similar when we are faced with the spiritual battles and the testing of your faith? And that applies to Christians of all ages in all life situations. You know, we try to figure it out or handle it on our own and end up maybe getting run over and perhaps injured by whatever it is that we're facing. James says, instead, be people of faith. Whenever you're facing these trials, troubles, and difficulties, it is a time for you to prove your faith, rely on God, and receive the blessing of joy through the process, because you can become a more steadfast person. See verse 3? You know the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And then verse 4, it helps you to be perfect and complete, not perfect in the sense of never doing anything wrong again, but perfect in the sense of growing into a more mature person in Christ. The guidance that James gives here, and I told you in the introduction last week, his inspiration from God and the way he puts it down on the page, it's just as practical as dirt. He gets right down to where we live and gives us the guidance and blessing that we need from God whenever we're facing things like this. Now, the second guidance and blessing that we have from God and James is to maintain the proper perspectives about wealth and salvation. Look at verses 9 through 11. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation. Because like the flower of the grass, he will fade away. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the grass, Its flower falls and its beauty perishes it. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. I believe this is a battle that people face in any day and age. It was a battle in the first century. It's a battle today. How many people long for material wealth? How many people would love to be rich, have lots of money, be able to buy whatever you wanted to buy, go whatever you wanted to go, do whatever you wanted to do? That seems to be an almost insatiable desire amongst people. And not just people of this day, it seems like it's been that way throughout history. And it seems like people never learn. And what we need to learn is that being rich is not what is important in life. Salvation is what is important in life. And the wisdom that we need is to pursue God first. And when I say pursue God first, what I mean is studying His Word, learning what He wants us to do, and following His will by doing what He wants us to do in order to be saved and then in order to stay saved. We spend so much of our lives pursuing the things of this world first, and then to pursue God, where we need to have the wisdom to pursue God first, and then trust Him to give us what we need. It is as Jesus says in Matthew 16:26, "For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul?" Would you rather be a billionaire, or would you rather go to heaven? I know what answer I would give to that. And we need to be sure we're chasing after the right things in this life. Chasing after God first. And striving to know and do His will. Because nothing is more important than your eternity. And you are the one who is in control of that. And the way you're in control of that is by whether you will pay attention to God and do what He says or not. The third guidance and blessing that James gives us here by the inspiration of God is to watch yourself, and you will receive the crown of life. Follow along as I read in verses 12 through 15. "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love Him." Another one of the promises of God. But you got to remain steadfast. You got to hang on to your faith. You got to let nothing nor anybody turn you away from God. Or if things get so bad in your life that you can't hang on to anything, hang on to God. Never let go of God. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. Have you ever thought something like this? Why is God letting that happen to me? I think we all do at one point or another in our lives. You know, most of the time, things that happen are things that either we or other people cause to happen, and we have to deal with it. Let no one say when he's tempted, I'm being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person, man, well, listen to this now, you got to get this. Each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. That's where the temptations come from, folks. They come from within you. And that temptation runs the gamut from whatever people can do. Why do men and women end up in extramarital affairs? Because they want to. I mean, that's the bottom line. The temptation was there, and somebody gave in to it. Why do people use either illicit drugs or alcohol to the point where those things control their lives? Because the temptation was there, and they gave in to it. Why do people do the things that they do? Because at some point, whenever the temptation, whatever it is, was there, they chose to give in to it. And you're going to see that choice in the very next verse. Let's look at 14 again before we go on. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire, and then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. It is absolutely essential that you know yourself and watch yourself and realize what is happening in your life all the time. Why is that essential? Because you are the only one who knows what is going on inside you. Even as close as husbands and wives are, you are still the only one who knows what's going on inside of you. You know your thoughts, you know your desires, you know your temptations, you know your danger zones, that is the things that you do, places you go, people you're around, and things that can lead you to sin. And it is necessary to recognize and avoid those things before they can become the practice of your life and lead you to spiritual death. Because that is what will happen, as James writes in these verses. Saw a story about an elderly teacher who had a pupil by his side as they took a walk through a forest. Along the way, the teacher stopped and pointed to 4 plants close by the trail. The first plant was just beginning to peep above the ground. The second had rooted itself into the earth. The third was a small sapling that had dug into the earth pretty well. And the fourth was a full tree. The teacher said to his young student, "Pull up the first plant." And the boy did so easily. The teacher said, "Now pull up the second." And he was able to do it again, but with some more effort. The teacher said, "Do the same with the third." The boy had to struggle and use all of his strength, but with a little bit of time and a whole lot of effort, he was finally able to pull the sapling up. And then the teacher said, "Now try it with the fourth." And the student dutifully went over and tried to do what the teacher told him to do. He was striving with all of his might, but he couldn't even budge it. And after a few minutes, the teacher said, "Here's the lesson. When you recognize a bad habit in your life, remove it as soon as you can. The longer you let it stay, the more it will take root in your life, and it will be so much harder to remove." And the same thing is true for temptations, isn't it? You may even be able to make the correlation with the story and your own temptations. Because the first thing that happens when a temptation comes upon us is that it is there. The second thing that happens is that desire may grow a bit for that temptation. The third thing that happens is that desire leads to sin. Notice especially verses 14 and 15 in the text. And then when that sin becomes the practice of your life, you enter spiritual death. And that can happen to anybody. I've seen it happen to many faithful Christians over the years, that they get caught like this. And again, we're in control of this process. If you allow the temptation to grow into desire and the desire into sin, then it can lead you to a hard heart, can lead you to spiritual death, and ultimately to eternal death. And each one of us has to accept responsibility for ourselves, because each one of us is in control. The greatest battles of life that you face are the battles with yourself. The greatest battles you face in life are the battles with yourself. But remember that God has promised we can win if we will follow His guidance. For example, 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and He will not let you be tempted beyond your strength, but with the temptation will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. That is one of the greatest promises of God that I know. You can win the battle. I can win the battle if we will pay attention to God's guidance for our lives. And the fourth guidance and blessing is do not be deceived and be grateful to God. Look at verses 16 through 18. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. What does James mean here? Do not be deceived about what? I believe James means that we don't allow ourselves to be deceived about whether the good gifts of life are worldly things like material wealth, which he's already addressed, or if the good things in life are the gifts from God. Gifts from God like what? Well, how about God himself? How about our families? How about the Word of God? How about the blessing of love and the blessing of the church, the blessing of God's promises? These are the good and perfect gifts of life, and they're all from God. They're all part of his plan to bless our lives, to help us enjoy what we have while we live on this earth, especially giving our lives to him in faith, and knowing that when we do that, we have the greatest gift in the world that is absolutely worth everything that this world has to offer. And that is a part of the reformation of our minds to get our eyes off this world and keep our hearts, minds, and eyes focused on God. Because there's nothing more important for us to do so we can secure our salvation. I was looking at a CD on my desk, and I started to think about the evolution of music just in my lifetime. Used to there was just only live performances, and then there were vinyl records, and then reel-to-reel tapes, and then 8-track tapes and cassette tapes and CDs, and now there's flash drives, smartphones, downloads from the internet, and that's a good example of rapid change. But remember this, no matter how much things may change in life, God and his word and his gifts are the same. And that's still the most important part of our lives. Y'all remember the story of David and Goliath? When David came to the battle line between the armies of Israel and the armies of the Philistine, he went there to check on his brothers at his father's request. And he heard Goliath come out and challenge the men of Israel to a one-on-one battle. No man of Israel was willing to face him, except David. David was not the biggest. He was not even part of the army. He was not the strongest. He was not the most experienced in battle. But David evidently had the greatest faith in God amongst all of the soldiers of Israel. He went out to the field of battle. Goliath looked at him, ridiculed him, cursed him, and promised to kill him. And if you were looking at Goliath and then looking at David, you'd probably say, yeah, he can probably do that. But David said this in 1 Samuel 17, verses 45 and 47. David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host to the Philistines, to the birds of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword or spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." What great faith in God. As you and I go about our daily lives, it is as if we are going onto the field of spiritual battle. Some of the battles that we face in life may seem to be giant, like Goliath. And if you're striving to live a holy life in our unholy world, you can be sure that you're going to have to face many battles in order to continue to be a person of faith. But be like David. Be like David and face each battle with great faith in God. Follow God's way for your life, and you will have the victory. You know, if David had looked at Goliath and then looked at himself and thought it over logically, he would have said, "I can't win this battle." But David looked at Goliath and then looked to God and said, "I can win this battle." And you and I can do the same today and receive the blessings of God. Now we want to offer the invitation to anyone who knows that you need God's help, especially if you know that you need God's help for the salvation of your soul. If you've not yet obeyed the gospel, we want to encourage and invite you to do that. If you need to rededicate your life to the Lord, if you're facing some battles that you need help with, we'd be glad to pray with you. If there's any way that we can help you, please come while we stand and sing together.